Well, hi everyone. I think you got an interesting story for you today. Another infrastructure surprise, this time in Japan, in the city of Osaka. On Wednesday morning, March 11th, a large diameter steel pipe erupted from below the ground surface and ended up extending 13 meters or 42 feet above the road surface. Usually, when you hear about infrastructure problems, with bridges and other types of structures, you usually associate a problem with some type of settlement or collapse. This time, this movement was upwards, quite surprising. So, we'll just go through what we know about this episode. So, this steel pipe is reported to be 3.5 meters in diameter or 11 feet. Had a total length of 27 meters or 88 feet. And as I mentioned, it's extended 13 meters or 42 feet above the roadway. So, about half of its length protruded from the ground surface. Reportedly, this structure was part of some underground shoring as part of a storm sewer project. They were connecting storm sewer lines with an underground stormwater detention basin. And reportedly, prior to this eruption of this pipe above the ground surface, workers were pumping water from out of the pipe. It would appear that you had what would be referred to as unbalanced hydrostatic forces or some buoyancy here with this pipe. Here's another view from a top angle. Some of those photos made it look like the pipe was supporting the bridge, which is kind of interesting. And this occurred beneath an elevated roadway close to the Hankyu Osaka Umeda station. No injuries were reported, and police were alerted to this episode early the morning of Wednesday, March 11th, by someone who called the police. These news articles from Japan, I've got links in the description, but there weren't a lot of details reported as to exactly how this pipe was supporting construction work in the area. But it reminds me of one of these Godzilla monsters that erupt from below the ground surface after millions of years of hibernation. And if you need a list, here it is: potential Godzilla monsters that like to come up from below the ground surface. This is Megalon. Now, my favorite part of this story was reported by CTV News, and it mentions the incident comes after Osaka announced last month that it had received an unusual donation of 21 kilograms of gold to pay for the maintenance of its aging water system. The donation worth $3.6 million was made in November by a person who had already given $3,300 in cash. Apparently, they don't have a lot of liquid assets, but they had a lot of gold, which is interesting. So that is a very altruistic thing, but also shows that someone actually had faith in their government officials in terms of using this money efficiently. I can't imagine someone, say, donating money to Rhode Island DOT to expedite the construction of the replacement westbound Washington Bridge. Here's some video showing them trying to rectify this pipe situation. They cut through the sidewall and apparently filled the pipe with water, although I would think concrete or flowable fill would have been a better choice. And they got it to go back into the ground, still sticking up about 5 feet or 1.5 meters. And apparently they torched that part off and reconstructed the road surface there. But rather interesting. I still have a lot of questions as to exactly how this pipe was being used to support its original purpose for underground shoring. And of course, this episode was highly disruptive to the local traffic there for the better part of a day. So, if I learn any more details about this story, I'll do a follow up video. And with that, I thought it's time to get back to making some book recommendations. And today I'd like to mention Robinson Crusoe. I recently reread this book and really enjoyed it. I originally read it when I was about 12. And of course, at that age, I read it strictly as an adventure story, which it clearly is. But reading it now at my age, I got so much more out of it. There's a lot of psychological and philosophical underpinnings that I thought was quite interesting. Numerous storylines like ignoring your parents' good advice for a safe, responsible career choice and instead going to sea. Uh, Issues about supply chain issues when you're stranded on a desert island and you realize all the things that you use as part of your daily life is no longer available. And of course, that certainly has implications in the modern age as well. So I really enjoyed this book. You can't go wrong, in my view, in reading the classics. I like to stick to Penguin Classics as well as those published by New York Review of Books, NYRB. I don't think there's a clunker in any of those publication series. So, again, if you want to check it out, I've got a link in the description. With that, I want to send a shout out to those of you who've contributed to buy me a coffee. That's one of the better ways to support this channel. And I certainly want to thank the channel members and those of you who've contributed to Super Thanks, additional great ways to support the channel. So thanks very much, everyone. Please stay tuned for future videos.